Thank you so much for watching, listening. Of course, I want you to subscribe. Is the Pope Catholic? Hello? You should subscribe right now. Why not? Because we have amazing content on this channel. And if nothing else, the jokes are spectacular. Sort of. So here's your joke. What did Spartacus say when the lion ate his wife? He said nothing, because he was gladiator. Get it? When the lion ate his wife, Spartacus, gladiator. And you're like, I know, it's a little bit of a stretch, so let's move on. Let's move on with our third episode in this series, Flip the Script. And last week we talked about the Good Samaritan and Jesus talking to the lawyer, answering his question, who's my neighbor? But this week I want us to think about, in the flipped script, who's the hero in this story, the story of the Good Samaritan. It's an interesting story. A dude is walking from Jerusalem on the road to Jericho, gets beat up, accosted by a group of bandits, thieves, robbers, and they don't just steal from him, they beat him to a bloody pulp. They rip off his clothes, they beat him up, and they leave him. In the Greek it says hemithano, meaning half dead. They leave him on the side of the road, half dead. And in this parable, a priest comes alongside, sees the dude that's half dead, keeps walking. A Levite comes along, sees the dude half dead, keeps walking. And in this parable, and the parable is an answer to the Jewish lawyer asking the question, who is my neighbor? In this parable, and this is where Jesus flips the script, normally you would think, this lawyer would think that the hero in this parable should be, the priest should be the Levite, because they're religious and upstanding and righteous citizens, of Israel. But in this parable, the hero is actually more considered the villain. When you're like, villain? Yeah, because Jesus is answering a Jewish lawyer. And Jews don't like Samaritans. In fact, Jews look down on Samaritans and think they are second-class citizens. They don't measure up. They're kind of the reprobates. We don't like them. They're off in their own little section of the country, and we avoid them like the plague, literally. But in this parable, the hero of this parable would be considered an enemy or somebody less than human by the Jewish lawyer. But in this parable, the hero acts very redemptively. Because when the hero, the Samaritan, comes along and sees the dude half dead, it says he was moved with compassion. He didn't walk on the other side. He was moved with compassion. And when you read what he did, it says he felt compassion. He came to him and bandaged his wounds. He poured in oil and wine. Think for a second, answer this question. Why that order? If you've ever had a bad injury, you ever cut yourself, the first thing you do is disinfect it. You would put in wine, disinfectant, and then you would put salve on it, oil, and then you would bandage it. So answer the question, or think about it. Give me some feedback. Why did Jesus do the reverse order? Bandaged the wounds, poured in oil and wine. And then it says the Good Samaritan lifted the guy up, put him on his own donkey, led him to an inn, to a place to stay, and took care of him. These are all very redemptive actions. And in this scenario, in this parable, the hero is actually perceived as the villain, or the other way around. He flips it. And I want us to be considerate of that whole scenario and think about a time in your life, and maybe you could just kind of consider, has there been a time in your life where someone who had been, you would think they would be unkind to you, but they were absolutely more than compassionate? You're like, let me think about that. If you can think of something, write it in the comments there, or just give me a thumbs up. I'm interested to get your feedback. Have you ever been in a scenario where somebody expected you to be hostile and cranky and rude, and you were kind instead? You were redemptive. You chose to be compassionate. Think about that, because this flips the script. If you can think of a scenario for yourself when you were actually like the hero, you were redemptive and compassionate, then just put a thumbs up there as well. Because this whole parable is the flipped script. And I want us to consider that Jesus wants us to flip the script in the world that we live in. We live in a world that's cranky, critical, hostile, condemning, combative, intolerant, impatient, all that stuff. And if we do the same thing, then how are we any different? But if we are compassionate, if we're kind, we're generous, we're patient, we're forgiving, we're loving, we go the extra mile. We put somebody who's been beat up, somebody who's dysfunctional, somebody who's been traumatized. Do you realize a lot of times people act cranky because they're acting out of trauma in their own soul? Or maybe they're non-responsive because of the trauma. This dude was left half dead in this parable. And when you read it in the Greek, it says they bandaged his trauma. It's the literal word in the Greek, trauma. So it's important for us to think about. There are a lot of people in our lives, in the flow, the river of people that we have that come in and out of our lives throughout our daily living that have trauma in their souls. And how do we flip that script? How do we let Jesus work through us to bring healing to those who have been traumatized? Woof. Now that's a question we're thinking about. So, thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing. And of course, hit the notification bell right there. We'll give you new content. And we're going to finish up this series, Flip the Script, next week, kind of on our march towards Easter. So thanks again. Catch you next week.